we're not technically starting the show.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Okay, let's see. Twitch has accepted the stream. YouTube has accepted the stream. Waiting for Facebook.
And this little microphone is having a tendency to drop. I hope it still sounds okay, right?
You sound perfect.
Good. Good.
Okay, Facebook has accepted the stream.
Okay, so you're going to send me that link.
Okay, so you want me to send you the link before the show starts? Okay.
Yes,
I
please.
can do that.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, so for that I go over here.
So it only took us an hour. It usually takes 5 minutes, but we're getting it done.
Yeah, it's great. Thanks for pulling it together.
Oh, please. No, it's your all's patience.
Okay, I've got the link, and I'm sending it in the group message.
Sure.
Okay, it's sent.
Okay.
I'm going to share it with people, but I don't know.
Sure. Whatever you want to do with it, you're welcome to do. And I'm just putting it in the Peace Center so it'll go. Okay. Okay.
Now, when everybody's all shared up, let me know.
Okay, I'm ready.
And I'm ready also.
Great.
Okay. All three people are ready?
Yep, we're all ready.
Okay, you see the timer on the screen? When it says on the air, you're on the air, okay?
Okay, thanks.
All right.
Welcome to Talking Peace with the Western New York Peace Center, being produced here at Think Twice Radio in the home of the future, also the home of our friend and producer Richard Wicca. Thanks, Richard. And thank you to our friends at WBNY, Buffalo's original alternative radio station out of Buff State. We're grateful to our friends at Buff State. And when I think of thankfulness, I think of our indigenous friends and the fact that we are, at least I am here, you know, those of us here in Western New York are on stolen Haudenosaunee land that was gotten through trickery and violence. And when I think of that, I think of people, enslaved people that came here and also suffered greatly, still suffering greatly, both those groups of people. And yet still they have so much gratitude. And I know that our Haudenosaunee friends start every event off with thanking Mother Earth, being thankful for the creatures and the nature, the plants and the celestial bodies and all of the things that make this a wonderful world, the creator and the love that animates it all. So it makes me feel grateful myself. And then they say Nyahweh and the people say Nyo. So Nyahweh.
Yo.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I am so thankful and excited. We're a little off schedule, but we have two wonderful and very patient and very knowledgeable guests who are going to talk about a really vital subject that so many of us are, so many people are suffering so much now in Gaza and in the occupied Palestinian territories, and in Israel. People are suffering too. So the whole situation is just a terrible situation, and we have two people who are working very hard to do everything they can, who know a lot about it, and who are helping us to make the changes that we need to make to save lives over there and to get to a different place there. So I want to introduce Craig Mokhiber. Craig is well known as an international human rights expert, worked for at least 30 years. Was it 30, Craig? for the UN? Over 30. Over 30 years working very hard for the UN in all kinds of situations, and especially about the Middle East, especially about Palestine, and resigned from the UN because of the atrocious failings that international law has failed so, and the international organization of the UN has failed so miserably to help. So welcome, Craig.
Thank you, Vicki. Very happy to be here.
We're so grateful to have you here. And Rob Jereski. Rob, I'm so grateful for Rob. Actually, I had a wonderful week. The wonderful and the terrible are side by side. I wrote an article about that after our week in New York. I spent a week with the CODEPINK World Court campaign that Rob has headed up, and trying to get the country's missions to get around the Security Council through the Uniting for Peace resolution. So Rob is a lawyer also, both are lawyers, and is working very hard on all kinds of wonderful projects in New York. So welcome, Rob.
Oh, thanks so much. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Oh, we're so grateful to have you. And it took us an hour, thank you, Richard, to get this show off the ground. We had a lot of technical glitches, but we're here now. And so we'd like to start off with just going around about values. So our topic is international law supports Palestine. And that is, it shouldn't be a revelation. And maybe it should be a revolution. I've been listening. Don't get me started. But we need the real changes. But when you think of that topic of international law and Israel and Palestine and the situation as it stands, what are the values that we need to that come to your mind on that topic? So we'll start with you, Craig.
Gosh, that's a good question, Vicki. I think, first and foremost, the values of international human rights. It's interesting when you think about how international human rights, the modern international human rights movement began with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. It began with this very simple phrase that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. That was 1948 when that declaration was adopted. But what's interesting is that same year that declaration was being adopted and that statement was being made of what the new global values after the Second World War were supposed to be. We were also seeing the adoption in 1948 of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. So two great normative steps forward on what values we were supposed to live by. But interestingly, at exactly the same moment, two things were happening in the world where the West in particular was carving out exceptions to those rules, to those new values. One in Palestine, where Nakba was being carried out with the support and acquiescence of the West, the ethnic cleansing and genocide of the Palestinian people from their indigenous land, and the birth of apartheid in South Africa. So even as these values, as you call them, were being birthed, we're also seeing hypocrisy, exceptionalism. And now for 76 years, the Palestinian people have been suffering from that exceptionalism, that exception that was carved out for the state of Israel, that has led to 76 years of ethnic cleansing, of persecution, of genocide, of apartheid, and leading us to the horrors that we're witnessing live on our screens today. When you ask me about the values that apply to this conversation, the values of human rights, and first and foremost, the imperative of closing the exceptions that have been created by the West, especially with regard to the Palestinian people.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So human rights and not having genocide and having that equality, not having apartheid, those are huge. And also having integrity. So as you're saying, not the hypocrisy. And Rob, what are some values that you think of?
Well, I should say, first of all, that I'm not an international law expert. I don't practice in that area at all. I don't have any competency in it. But the basic principle of the law is the equality of the people who come before judges to have their disputes adjudicated. And so equality before the law, I think, is a really fundamental principle and a value that we all should obey the laws, and we should all be answerable to the law, and it should be applied even-handedly, equally, because we all have inherent value. We all have the same human value, and no one is above the law. So I think it's basically those very fundamental principles and values that I believe infuse all areas of law and are so important in this area where the law has seemed to put aside the rights, or has, not the law, but those who are wielding power have put aside the inherent value of Palestinians, their rights to self-determination, their various rights, and those are the values that need to be remembered by everybody and to be restored in this conflict.
Right. Well, thank you. Yes. So that is very key. And actually, of course, you're bringing so many other subjects come to mind, too, about equality under the law, that no one is above the law, that's a principle of the legal framework, the framework in this country, the framework in international law, and the framework to why there's proportionality is a law under, that lack of disproportionality in response is a war crime, all of that. So you're making me think of that. But I'm going to say the ones I usually say, which is I think of truth and love. Because the truth that we're sharing right now, and the truth of the fact that every life is equal, that no group, no racism or ethnocentrism or any of that is justified. That truth that we're all, equal, as you said, equal under the law, or just equal value as human beings, that we're all have inherent goodness and inherent values and inherent rights and responsibilities too. So and then love, so that so finding, sharing the truth of what's going on and doing that, in a spirit of love. And it's the spirit of love that makes all of us act on these issues, especially when they're far from us. It's not that we're seeing it. We see on TV. We get news, but because of caring and love of other people and of justice and of the creation, that we love each other, is what causes people to do activism. To take those risks and do that work. So I'm grateful to both of you for all the work that you're both doing, have done, and all the roles that you're taking. So let us, and we've already really started into the subject, but the next part is really sort of to lay out. And I want to say, I'm just reading Khalidi, what is his first name? Professor Khalidi's book on the 100 Years' War on Palestine. So it is a real eye-opening book. Even, for people who think they know the subject, there's still a lot more. There's a lot of inside detail that he has, both from his family and just from his studies and et cetera. But I'm going to go back to you, the both of you, to give a good we're really sort of saying, how did we get to where we are now, which you've already started us on, Craig, and also what is the current situation now. So we'll sort of go around successively on that. And I want, again, for you to start. We'll just go, the Haudenosaunee go in counterclockwise, so that's what we're doing. Anyway, here in Buffalo.
On your screen, I don't know what order I'm seeing it on mine.
Yeah, on mine. Yeah.
I think Rashid Khalidi's book is a good place to start, because the book is called The 100-Year War, and it is 100 years. When you think about the fact that, just a few years before I was born, there was this place called Palestine. There was no state called Israel. Mm-hmm. And for hundreds and hundreds of years, you had Palestinians, mostly Muslim and Christian, but also a minority of Palestinian Jews, who were living side by side, largely in peace, in a place called Palestine, on Palestinian farms, in Palestinian cities, running Palestinian shops, living in Palestinian homes, on streets with Palestinian names, in villages with Palestinian names, in a country called Palestine. That sounds very self-evident. It's just a fact of history.
Right.
But because of a campaign of 100 years to erase the indigenous people of Palestine, that is not self-evident to a lot of people in the West in particular. They're not aware of the history of this place or of the fact that the genocide did not begin in October in Palestine.
Right.
That genocide has been going on for at least 76 years, and I think Professor Khalidi would say 100 years.
Right.
Because it has been a process which we are very familiar with, the treatment of indigenous people in the United States, in Canada, in Latin America, in Australia, in New Zealand, in Palestine, that you have to begin with a myth. And the myth upon which it was all founded was a slogan that was created in the West of a land without a people for a people without a land. And with that one phrase, an entire people was erased. They didn't exist, which allowed then their eviction, their colonization, their persecution, their purging. And that purging has continued in the 1940s, in the 1950s, in the 1960s, and right up until today, the violent ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people and their replacement with largely Western settlers in a state founded not for equal rights for Christians, Muslims, and Jews, not in a place where the indigenous people are full citizens, but a supremacist and apartheid state for a group of people transplanted onto the land to replace the indigenous Palestinian people. There have been, through the years, a number of proposals on how to bring this to a close, the horror of 100 years that has happened there. But the reason that we are where we are now is that this is not just a product of the settlers who took the land from the Palestinians. It is a Western project. First of the United Kingdom, of the British colonial masters who colonized the land after controlled the land after the First World War, and then subsequently passing the baton to the United States to guarantee a settler colonial project in Palestine that would exclude the rights of the Palestinian people to the benefit of a Western project that really benefits weapons manufacturers, oil companies, those with imperial ambitions, and does nothing for the people who live on the land except continue oppression and conflict. I don't want to get too far ahead, but that to me is the foundation that we are struggling now with. And if you look at the role that the country that we're sitting in right now, the United States, has played historically and is playing now, this is not just an observer. In the current genocide, for example, the United States is not just an observer. The United States is a necessary component. This genocide could not happen without the active engagement of the government of the United States, and frankly, of media corporations in the United States that manufacture consent for the genocide, but in particular of a government that provides weapons, financial support, intelligence support, diplomatic cover, the use of the veto to prevent a ceasefire, the use of official government podiums to disseminate misinformation, justification
Right.
for war crimes. All of that is essential to what's happening on the ground, and this could not continue without this policy of the government of the United States and without, as I've said, the complicity of Western media corporations. Our job as people who care about human rights, who believe that Christians, Muslims, Jews, and others should live equal and in dignity, our job is to expose that and to oppose it and to try to bring it to an end by any way that we possibly can, exercising whatever leverage we have as human beings who are living in the West, in the belly of the beast, as it were.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Craig. All of that is so true, and it's making me think of an email that I just got from you, Rob, and I did answer. I did write all those letters with whatever help was offered to it. So if you want to talk a little bit about I mean, it's just a very natural thing to segue into the media media work that you were just doing. If you want to share that. And talk, yeah, so anyway, go ahead with that.
I'm not sure about the media work that you're talking about, Vicki.
Oh, I'm talking about the letters. The letters to the different outlets about different recent reports that have been made and how they're so slanted in and making it seem as if this is just a natural disaster that's happening on its own and absolving any of the war crimes and the war criminals of their roles.
Yeah. Sure. It was an action alert I received from Safet Katovic, who was in the government of Bosnia during the genocide that was being committed in the 90s, and he was sharing that because the media, the mainstream media, has been just outrageous in their characterizations of what is happening, who is in the way of ceasefire, what Israel is actually doing, speaking about, I mean, all of the lies that are told. I mean, the large ones are, who is in the way of the ceasefire? We were told about, Hamas being in the way of the ceasefire. The U.S. government said that and introduced a resolution in June 10th, or it was passed in June 10th, at the Security Council that basically had one abstention, which was Russia, and it was basically on the promise that the ceasefire, the outlined plan for a ceasefire, was one that Israel supported. It came from Israel. It was approved by Israel. And from June 10th until today, 3 months of just destruction and daily massacres. They kept trying to tell us that Hamas was in the way of a ceasefire, and in fact, what happened soon after, on June 10th, was that Netanyahu and other ministers said, no, we don't support a ceasefire. This isn't what we want. We want to continue the war until Hamas is destroyed. We want and there are other lies that are told, I mean, about whether Israel is at all interested in a two-state solution, for instance, which has been the language that the West has been using of where this endless negotiation is going, for this endless peace negotiation is going. And Israel's, ministers have told us they have no interest. In fact, just today, the leader of the most left-leaning Israeli party indicated that a Palestinian state was not in the cards anywhere in the near future. Basically, buying into the most right-wing government's position that self-determination is not a project that is urgently required and, in fact, should be avoided. That's in the face of the authoritative World Court decision on July 19th, where the International Court of Justice declared that the occupation has to end as soon as possible. The occupation of Palestinian lands that were occupied post-1967. But the lies of the media, are beyond that. I mean, Israel's acting in self-defense, we're told, as a right to self-defense. And there's no characterization of the right of self-defense of Palestinians, which exists. Palestinians have a right to resist a brutal occupation, an apartheid regime. They have a right to do that. I mean, there are laws of war, of course, but the media doesn't tell us that the Palestinians have these rights. And so, thankfully, there are outlets for news that are not the mainstream corporate media that echoes what the U.S. government or the State Department or Israel tell us. And that's why when we're meeting people on the street in our actions, it's clear from the responses that we are the majority. It's clear on the street. It's clear in polls.
Right.
Our position, finding that, basically that Israel should not continue to be getting weapons from the U.S. government or Germany, and that the slaughter must stop immediately, that it's unlawful, it's indiscriminate slaughter, like you mentioned, lacking proportionality.
Right.
All these elements of an unlawful military activity, those are positions that are widely held, even though the corporate media continues to push these lies. So, that was an action that we sent out, CODEPINK sent out today for people to let the media know that we see what they're doing. Will they change? Who knows? But, it's important for them to see that we see what they're doing.
And I think, this show is part of that, of telling, and strengthening the awareness that people have, and as you say, that most people already have. And I want to say, especially as I'm, I said this on this show before, I'm the daughter of a German Jew Holocaust survivor, and my dad was actually had to leave Munich in 1933 as a 15-year-old because he was such a radical. So he beat up the leader of the Hitler Youth, and he refused to say Heil Hitler when he went up to get his prize at his gymnasium. And he was told that he had better leave before otherwise somebody would be taking care of him. So he did leave, and he went to then Palestine. And he was on a kibbutz, and then he was, as a German Jew, he was part of that move, and the Zionist move. Anyway, so he was just part of that, and I wonder if we can reconnect this audio. So, Richard? Okay. Okay, yeah, okay. So if you can, maybe should Rob set up another one now?
Yeah, if somebody ended
Yeah.
the meeting, who ended it?
Yeah, no, it ended itself because it was a free thing.
Oh, okay, I got it.
Okay, so if Rob can set up another, then you can
Just have to
connect
give
them.
me the meeting ID.
If you can set it up again. Okay. So we'll just do what we did before. It ended at like 3, let's say 3:25 or something, 32:25.
Okay.
Something
And
like
we'll
that. Just a couple seconds
And we'll
ago.
just put them together.
And we'll just
after.
put them together,
Yeah.
right. So it means that as far as the live stream, it'll be a little wonky, but
It'll be a little long.
never mind.
Right.
Never mind about that. We'll just see what we can.
So he's going to send you the information.
Okay, so he's doing it now. He's
Okay.
doing it now. Yep.
And then it'll probably be the same thing, a group email or a group text.
Yeah, we'll see what he tells us.
Okay. What, quite the show, isn't it?
Yeah, it's been never a dull moment here. So we've got about half a show so far.
So,
And
anyway, so
no
I'm always
worries.
trying to prevent stuff like this from happening.
Right, well, they happen.
So what I do is I have a complete checkoff list.
Right.
And I sent it to the other engineer, and I said, read my checkoff list. What did I do wrong? Did Zoom change something, or do I need to change something? And he's not responding, which means he's
Okay.
baffled. Okay, what are you going to tell me?
Okay, so he's going to send it.
Through?
Oh, I don't know. When he's ready, he said I'm in. So
He's got to give us the meeting ID and the password.
just send. Okay, send. Okay, he emailed it.
Okay, he emailed.
Okay.
it. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, we're waiting for that email. Refresh.
So we'll have to have
I got it.
a new link too, right, for the Facebook stream?
No, I'm going to just keep the Facebook thing running.
Oh, okay.
That way it's the
Sure.
easiest thing to do.
Sure.
Okay, he gave it to me. So now
Okay.
I join the meeting,
Very good.
and let's see. 7915. Eight 652. Five 6 4. Now we put in his password. X13. 0x13. QU. Join meeting.
I'm sorry
Okay.
about that.
That's all right. No harm done. No, we're getting it done. I'm sure those of you who've been on Facebook, thank you for your patience. We'll splice this show together, and I hear that people like to see things go wrong once in a while because it makes us all know how human we are. So.
Okay, just tell me when I should start the timer.
Okay, so you can you can start it up again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here we go. When you see the timer start, just pick up where you left off.
Sure.
It was a very nice way of saying it, Vicki.
Well, it's a very nice way of, maybe they're afraid I'm going to talk about my dad for too long, because I could talk about him for a while. But anyway, the part of it is, too, that he was in the Haganah. And I want to say he also said I was not Jewish as soon as I was old enough to think, which we know that's not true. And I see that as a product of what he experienced when he was there. And then he ended up joining the British police and the British Army. He was in the British Army, ended up, joining his parents who got out at the 11th hour in 39, and who had managed to find a sponsor and emigrate to Lexington, Kentucky. So that's where my dad, that was his adopted home. And we lived there for 2 years as kids. I just went back there for the first time since we lived there when I was a kid.
Well, I think that's important. Like, that whole story is, I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, it's a compliment to the dispossession of Palestinians is the influx of populations of people who were themselves targeted for, extermination, discrimination, who experienced this trauma, passed it on to their children, like my mother did, seeing her, beloved grandmother, attacked on the street, and just the experiences that she had, and drinking the Kool-Aid about the land without a people for a people without a land. That was widely read. And my mother's a brilliant person. And still, it wasn't the focus of her life. She didn't live in Palestine, Israel, but she was duped. And I think the new generation, or the newer generations of Jews are much more critical and have heard the voices of Palestinians, are aware that the history is a brutal one, and that it's part of a history, a European history of colonization.
Right.
And I think it's important that you talk about your father. I don't think that it was off track.
Well, and actually, the other part of it is never again, as they say. Never again is now, never again is always, never again is especially not by us, right? So we know what that is. And I keep looking at what's going on in Israel, and I see Germany. I see, the indoctrination that people have had when they don't understand, and this has been the Zionism that has been conflated with Judaism in a way that is so unhealthy and so unhelpful and so so contrary to the Jewish principles anyway, of valuing every life. If you've killed somebody, you've killed the whole world. If you've saved a life, you've saved the whole world. And those, so anyway, so I feel like I'm so proud of being part of Jewish Voice for Peace, or the Western New York Peace Center, or other groups. The groups are CODEPINK, the Christian Peace Coalition, which your very own group, Craig. So there are so many groups that are working hard, but I want to say that the Jewish Voice for Peace is a wonderful one of them, because this is where people really are saying and seeing where colonialism is getting conflated and inserted and manipulated in a way that is just couldn't be more illegal and wrong, devastating and contrary to our principles. So on that, I just ask Craig for your response to your thoughts on that and on the current situation.
Yeah, I think absolutely. And you mentioned Jewish Voice for Peace, and If Not Now, and CODEPINK.
Right.
And I think what groups like Jewish Voice for Peace are doing and have been doing throughout this entire crisis is extraordinary in a lot of ways. One, because it directly challenges the horrors that are being perpetrated right now in the Middle East, with direct action on the front lines in very visible ways. And that in its own right, that sort of classic defense of human rights, is an extraordinary thing. Secondly, it's the creativity of these groups, in doing things like taking over Grand Central Station in the busyness of Grand Central Station, or the Statue of Liberty with all of the symbolism involved there. The things in their own right would be extraordinary. But these are Jewish groups. These are people who are asserting their Jewish values, and in doing so are at once defending human rights because that's what you do. You defend human rights. But at the same time saying, no, this is not in our name. This is, Israel does not represent the Jewish people. Zionism is not the ideology of the Jewish people. The persecution of the Palestinians is not in our name. We don't support it. We're speaking out against it. And that is very, very powerful. First, it strips away the propaganda, the hasbara points of the government of Israel and its proxy groups that tried to say that it's doing this because it's defending the Jewish people. No, it's not. And I think that our Jewish brothers and sisters in groups like JVP are making that very clear.
Yes.
And I think it also is a powerful and potent antidote against anti-Semitism.
Oh, yes.
You know, interestingly, maybe ironically, when the Israeli government or groups like AIPAC and the like claim that what they're doing is a Jewish thing, they are also feeding anti-Semitism.
Yes. Yes.
And what JVP is saying, as we are all saying, is that Israel does not represent the Jewish people. It is a state like any other state. It's responsible for its own crimes, and those are condemned by Jews and Christians and Muslims and agnostics and Buddhists and Hindus and people of all faiths and all backgrounds. And that's the beauty of the movement that we're seeing in the U.S. and across the West, is that it is a movement that cuts across all faith traditions, all ethnicities, human rights defenders, peace activists, labor unions, all of us together saying, absolutely not. And that is doubly, triply, quadruply powerful. And I think all credit to groups like JVP, groups like If Not Now, even as I recognize that all of this, all of us are in solidarity with the Palestinians and their leadership of the struggle against these horrors. But that solidarity is powerful, and you know it frightens power because it's powerful. And I think something fundamental is shifting because of these kinds of initiatives and these kinds of groups. I think that the 100 years of horror that we have witnessed are seeing a turn, and a big part of that turn is because this is a coalition of people of all backgrounds, including Jewish sisters and brothers from across the country, across the West, and across the world, who are standing up to say, you know, not just no, but not in our name, as you said. Vicky, never again means now, never again means never again for anyone.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And Rob?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I gotta say the you know, Jews, like any people, any religion, are not a monolith, and there are histories and traditions that are, you know, anathema one to the other. You know, that one faction or one sect of Jews, one interpretation of the tradition is at odds with another. And I think that there is, you know, we need to recognize that there is within the Jewish history and Jewish traditions or interpretations of the tradition a strain of not exceptionalism, although there is that, but of an anti-humanism, and I don't think that you know, it is against, you know, it's not anti-Semitic, it's not unreasonable. And it's important, I think, to recognize that, because the settlers who are looking at the Jordan Valley and are saying, from the river to the sea, yes, that's right. It's going to be under Jewish sovereignty, and it's the Euphrates River that we're talking about. We're not talking about the Jordan River. Those Jews root themselves in a tradition, in religious texts, and so. Just because they're illiberal, and it's the liberal Zionists that I think will come to recognize, like Beinhart, I think has documented like about a decade ago, the shift of liberal Jews away from support for Israel's policies. That's one very large group within Jewish communities that are changing, but there is a very strong, and very broadly represented in Israel, unfortunately, interpretation of Jewish tradition and Jewish values that is very much at odds with liberal values, with humanistic values, and we see it in the killing of children, in the humanitarian aid convoys that are intercepted, in the soldiers that would look through a sniper scope and kill a child. We see and those people doing that, and we have to wrestle with that. We have to confront that. That those are our brothers and sisters, our co-religionists, and I'm not religious. They are our people who are doing these horrible things, and they're rooting it in a part of our tradition that has to be challenged. So.
I want to add, now I'm very interfaith, so I do, I'm a member of a really scandalous number of different faith houses of worship in Buffalo, 5 in fact. But anyway, and one of them is is one of the synagogues here. And what I'd say is, I think you're right. And as much as I love the different religions, and I feel like the basics are the same, but and I want to thank Khadija, who has made a lot of comments along our thing. So we're seeing them, and we appreciate them. Thank you, Khadija, and thank you for your niece or nephew also. Had a comment for you early on, Craig, that they found they saw you on here. But anyway, I wanted to say, that just as we, are flawed beings, and the wonderful and the terrible is side by side in us and in our world, it's also in our religion. So there's a lot of wonderful things in our religions, but there's a lot of things that really don't belong in there, that weren't right in the first place, that weren't divinely inspired, but were very humanly crafted in there for either why-ever misunderstandings or power plays or why-ever, or people's biases. So there's a lot in there. And the other thing I wanted to say is back to information. So that I think that a lot of people in Israel don't even really know and may not want to know. That's why I said about reminding me of Germany, of not really wanting to know what's going on, not hearing it and not wanting to know it, or even, suspecting it, but just, and that torn feeling, because a lot of it is also that we are social beings. So when you have your family and friends are in a certain mode, then sometimes the persons go right along with that. And we see that politically in this country right now, about we're not going to go down that path because that's very long. And we're running out of time too, because there is so much to talk about. And I do want us to get to the 2 of the more specific things. And so I'll ask you each about those 2 specific things too. So Craig, if you would talk about your article, and which is such a great article that talked about how BDS is really a legal requirement after the World Court decisions. And if you would talk about that a little bit, please.
Okay. Yeah, so this is the most recent advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice of the World Court, which had a lot to say. Rob already hinted at some of it. But one of the, so for example, I mean, it found very clearly that Israel was practicing racial segregation and apartheid. So, you know, from a legal perspective, that has been generally accepted by human rights organizations, international lawyers, and others. But now you've got the World Court saying it. It put to rest this very problematic formulation of the United States and the UK and other Western countries that they had created this kind of, I mean, we spoke when we first started out here about this exceptionalism that they built around Israel, that Israel didn't have to respect international law and it didn't have to respect the rights of the Palestinian people. And one of the tricks that they used was to say, well, we've got a peace process, we've got the Oslo Agreement, courts can't interfere. This has to be negotiated between the parties. In other words, that an occupied, oppressed people have to negotiate for their rights with their occupier and their oppressor, was what the American government and the British government was insisting on. And the World Court said, nonsense. These obligations are legal obligations on Israel, and these rights are legal rights that the Palestinian people hold, and they don't have to beg for them, and they don't have to negotiate for them. But the other thing that they said that you mentioned is that, you know, they laid out a number of obligations of Israel, but they said, by the way, all other countries in the world also have obligations to cut off any economic, trade, or other relations with Israel that relate to the occupied territories. In other words, a duty, an obligation to boycott and divest from any economic activities that relate to the occupied territories, any company, any financial venture, anything at all. So after years of the US government and other Western governments trying to crush the BDS movement, the movement for boycott, divestment, and sanctions, it was patterned after the boycott movement in South Africa under apartheid. The same things that we did for grapes to support the farm workers in the United States, the same thing we did for environmental causes and others. The U.S. has tried to crush that. Some other Western countries tried to crush it. The World Court has said, no, not only can you not crush that, you are obliged to participate in it. You must do from these because the occupation itself is entirely unlawful. Any contribution of another state to that is also unlawful. Can I just say, I know we're going to run out of time, but you know that last conversation was so rich that that we had, and I just didn't want to leave it behind without saying,
please.
The school year has started, and as we say, the participation of in every demonstration that you have seen since this genocide captured the attention of people, Jewish people have played a disproportionately visible and powerful role. And I think that is something that we need to celebrate, that kind of solidarity. And it's a big deal because, you know, one of the tools that they have used to try to suppress resistance to this genocide is to accuse anyone who speaks up against it of being an anti-Semite.
It's ridiculous, ridiculous.
And the solidarity of our Jewish sisters and brothers in these movements on college campuses, in the streets, in Washington, in New York, and all around the world strips that accusation away immediately. There's nothing anti-Semitic about standing up against apartheid and genocide and gross violations of human rights. And as I always say, if it's anti-Semitic to criticize Israeli human rights violations, then it's Islamophobic to criticize the Saudi or Iranian violations. It's anti-Buddhist to criticize Myanmar's violations. It's anti-Hindu to criticize India's violations. And either all of that's true or none of it is true. But it is important that these lines of solidarity exist so they don't get away with those kinds of smears. And it's especially important because the entire power structure of the West, of the United States and other Western countries is lined up against us. And we see the courage of college students at risk of arrest, police beating, suspension, from college smearing, doxing, and so on. They are still standing up to say, no, to what is happening here. And I think that solidarity is something to behold and something to be recognized. So so just that little detour, on that point.
Oh, it's so important, and thank you for bringing that up. Absolutely, and we appreciate them so much here, our students here in Western New York as well as certainly in New York City. They very much have been. And so I'm going to ask you, Rob, if you want to talk a little about the mobilization and the press conference and all of that too.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the points that Craig was making about his about this World Court decision and pointing out that the crushing of BDS movements or the efforts to do that are in fact in violation of or completely contrary to what the highest court in the world has said is our obligations. The students who just today, actually, the School of International Public Affairs students took over part of that graduate school because of a range of issues, one of them being the failure to divest by Colombia, the lack of transparency about their investments in the occupied territories and the benefits that they enjoy from the oppression of Palestinians. So the students are back, and they're exemplary because they are standing for international law against cruelty and oppression. So it's so ludicrous to see how the establishment just tries to smear them, and it's just transparent, really, to everyone. Everyone sees it. Everyone sees what's happening in Gaza. Everyone sees the sort of fascism that is driving that in the Israeli government, and the ethno-supremacy that is doing that as well.
Right.
And so when the students stand up for transparency and to stop investing in that, and they get these smears, it discredits the university establishment, it discredits the U.S. government, and it in Europe, where we've had students taking over in Switzerland, they took over universities. In France, in Paris, they did. It's a worldwide movement, and we are the majority. We are the humane, reasonable, lawful majority. And it's great. The article is so clear, Craig. I really enjoy it. That's like part of what is enjoyable about it, just how the lucidity of it. And it's very topical and opportune right now when you publish it. I mean, the students are going back, and they're not going to stop. And none of us are going to stop. But the work that we've been doing in New York focused on supporting South Africa's application at the World Court. They filed an application against Israel in December, charging it with violating the Genocide Convention, to which they're both signatories, or parties, actually. And they were able to get decisions on, preliminary decisions called provisional measures, or provisional measures were issued by the World Court. They have the force of law, and they require Israel to take steps to prevent the risk of irreversible harm to Palestinian rights that are protected under the Genocide Convention. Among the provisional measures that were Israel's directed to obey, and which Israel's own judge endorsed, was a party to. I think it was 15-1. There was I can't remember what country she was from. I think it was Uganda. The judge who voted. Where was she from?
She's from Uganda, Judge Sebatunde.
Yes. She was an outlier. Who knows, given what has been revealed about the Mossad interfering with the due process of parties at the International Court of Justice, or in the International Criminal Court. What was done to this judge? She was threatened with. There was a prosecutor at the International Court of Justice, or Criminal Court rather, that charges people, not states, and that prosecutor was threatened by the Mossad. So it's not unreasonable to believe that some judges may be threatened in the ICJ as well. In any case, the provisional measures that Israel is meant to obey, is ordered to obey, include the provision of humanitarian aid, that they must enable the provision at scale from every source to respond to an urgent humanitarian crisis. And Israel has been flouting those orders. And South Africa went back, got further orders, and each one, the most recent orders were in May and required Israel, first of all, they said the humanitarian areas to which you are directing populations in Rafah to go are unsuitable for human habitation.
Right.
And there were 7,000 tents. There are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who were directed. There's no sewage system. And we see the outcome that was predictable. This was in late May. And so our efforts, you wanted me to speak about the activists' efforts in New York City at the UN. We write letters to remind countries of their obligations under the Genocide Convention and under the Geneva Conventions, and their obligations to effectively, at this point, sanction Israel, to stop Israel from continuously and continuing to flout the directions of the World Court, the International Court of Justice, and these countries have the power to do that. The Security Council is the first body within the UN that's meant to enforce the rulings of the ICJ. But when they don't, there is a history and there's a mechanism and a history of its use called Uniting for Peace, which allows the General Assembly, when the Security Council fails to ensure international peace and stability by enforcing the law, the General Assembly can become seized of the issue and can convene emergency sessions to do that, to enforce international law. And so we are asking countries primarily to take the most urgent actions, the most impactful actions as soon as possible, which are bilateral sanctions. Who knows if we can get the UN General Assembly to act as fast as those nations would. But short of, if these nations will not or are unable to pass bilateral sanctions, there are multilateral sanctions through the General Assembly should be passed. And so we've been visiting with diplomats at the various countries that sit on the Security Council and important trading partners with Israel, like Turkey, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Brazil, Venezuela, Germany. Those countries have had important trading relations with Israel, and we're asking them to sanction Israel, to stop giving oil or selling oil, in the case of Turkey, which transships Azerbaijani oil, or Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan that send their own oil to Israel. Stop doing it. You can threaten to withhold the oil on condition of Israel protecting the Palestinians' rights. And those are the sorts of efforts that we're making to try to let these countries know that they have obligations and that we want them to meet their obligations to protect Palestinians.
And luckily, some of the countries are listening and are doing some of that. I know Colombia stopped shipping coal, right? And a number of countries have signed on to the World Court case. But as you point out, there are other things that they can do and that we're hoping they can do. And I want to say also that we're hoping, so people, if you're from another country or you have ties, you can let the country missions that you're you're connected to know, or look at CODEPINK's campaign page. There's a campaign page that has lots of information that includes this press conference that you're having on the 16th and of March, from at 1 to 2:30 or something like that on September 16th. So there's a lot of things. Meanwhile, and just getting the word out, or share this video, we will get there. We have to get there. And meanwhile, when things start to change, sometimes they change much more quickly than we could imagine, in ways that we couldn't imagine. So I would just say, we can hope and pray for that, but we're running out of time. So that's what I'm really focused on. So maybe we'll have another, hopefully glitch-free gathering. I hope it hasn't scared you off. But both of you are doing so much and have so much to share. We will share that article again on social media and elsewhere. We'll share the link to the CODEPINK page for the campaign. And honestly, I'm so grateful to both of you. Thank you, Khadija, for all your comments what we've been seeing, and they're a part of the transcript of this whole thing. So we just couldn't be more grateful to you both, and we'll just keep right on, and we will get there. We will get there. We have to get there because people are suffering too much. So I can just say thank you again so very much. This is Talking Peace, and together we've been talking peace in truth and love.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Craig.
Oh, thank you both. And I'm so glad to have you meet each other. So now you meet each other, you have each other's contact info, and and onward. Onward
and upward. Don't hesitate to reach out, both of you.
I won't. Thank you both. Thank you both so much, really. Peace and love.
Peace and love.
We're going to get there.
We will. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Bye for now.
Okay.
There it is. We did it. We did